into Hollywood, we've not talked a lot about making connections between that cinema and the larger cultural historical moments. We've noted that World War I offered a vacuum of movie production around Europe that American cinema was able to fill and able to define for the world what cinema was, and what types of stories it would tell, and how it would tell those types of stories. But we've not been very intimate about we've not talked about the intimate connections between that cinema and the larger cultural historical moment in which that came out. Well, today, and on Wednesday's class, we're going to be doing that. Today with Germany, and connecting it up to the specifics of the late 19-teens and early, and all of the 1920s. And then on Wednesday's class, we're going to do the same thing with Soviet film in the 1920s and a very specific types of films that come out in those two time periods. In a couple of weeks, we'll talk about Italian cinema after World War II and talk about that as a national cinema at a particular moment. And we'll do the same thing with French cinema in the 1960s and Hollywood cinema in the 1960s as well. So today kind of marks that first story that we're telling that really involves the country, not just the filmic productions of that country in that way. And in order to do that, we have to paint a little bit of a historical story, portrait of Germany at the particular time we're talking about. We are, roughly speaking, just again to kind of put in that mental calendar that we've got going on, we are roughly talking about 1919 to 1933. Okay, that doesn't seem very roughly, actually. Roughly is the teens and 20s. This is not rough at all, actually. This is the specific time period we're going to be talking about. It opens up in 1919, and I'm going to come back to the history in just a moment, with the release of a film called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Which we're going to watch a lot of in just a minute. And then, so this marks 1919, and I'm going to come back to this film. And 1933 marks the year in which Hitler is elected Chancellor of Germany. And Hitler is going to very much change the specific types of film and style of film, the style in which we're going to give the name Expressionism in just a moment. He's going to radically change that type of filmmaking towards propaganda. That very much one could attribute both the end of the Expressionist period with the rise of Hitler, but also the rise of Hitler as maybe the best filmmaker of the 20th century. Now, if you're recording me, I've got air scare quotes all around this. That is, the best filmmaker of the 20th century is obviously one that is entirely evaluative and judgmental, and frankly has nothing to do with Hitler's production of great movies. But that is that he is going to be, along with Stalin in the 1920s, but even more forcefully with Germany in the 1930s, he is going to employ film in such a way that we could respond to the question, how does the Holocaust happen? First, responding to that question by talking about cinema's influence on the rise of the Nazi Party and all of the little subset parties that are associated with the Nazi Party. So when I say something that sounds so bald as saying Hitler's the greatest filmmaker of the 20th century, the big caveat is that he is the most influential, really, in that sense, filmmaker. Because one of the responses to how could this have happened, the Holocaust, is to look back at cinema's influence in creating and then working in the environment that gave rise to something like fascist dictator in Hitler and then all of his individual plans that he had, the final solution, etc. So we got to paint some of that history leading up to 1919 in some sort of way. So we're roughly talking about that time period. Now, World War I, WW1 up here, it creates for Germany a very weird moment, a very weird historical moment, because for those of you who are history buff sort of thing, I'm going to make some claims about history that will be true for our discussion, but if we were to really be spending any time investigating it, they would no longer be true, such as the statement that Germany causes World War I, which is a vast overstatement, but for our purposes is very much true. World War I is started when Germany, who has got tremendous plans for empire. Remember, British Empire had for, at that time, well over 100 years expanded its reach all the way over to Hong Kong. right? That the notion of what England was had stretched obviously into Australia, right? If you're Australian, are you a British subject also? Do you have a free transportation visa with inside of any British colony? I believe you still do. Same thing was true with Hong Kong, right? That Britain owned, and again, this is historically not entirely accurate, but they owned Hong Kong under their notion of empire. Indeed, in 1996, I keep calling it Germany, Britain started a 50-year handover of Hong Kong back to mainland China. So 1996 starts a 50-year period that will end in 2046, in which Hong Kong will be entirely back over to entirely handed back over to China. Thank you. Just keep my country straight for me, please. Right. So this notion of empire had attracted many other groups around Europe and Asia as well. The Hungarian, Austrian Empire, the Ottoman, and its relationships with the Ottoman Empire. The notion of growing one's country, not in terms of borders, but in terms of dominance and influence, in the way that Britain had done more successfully than any other country. So Germany comes into World War I, starting it by assassinating the Archduke of Austria, Archduke Ferdinand, I think it was, right? In 1914, they assassinate the guy who's the Archduke of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and it starts World War I. Well, at the end of World War I, that's a big jump right there, from the beginning to its end. At the end of World War I, Germany is very much apologetic for what they have just done. So much so that, as they will also do after World War II, they're going to make reparations, pay back their enemies, by cutting off a part of their country and giving it to that country. As after World War II, Germany is going to hack off a northwest quadrant of their country and give it to Belgium and France. It'd be like if we started a war with Canada, and then at the end of it go like, oh, I'm really sorry we did that, you can have Maine. All right, they just close this and that sort of thing. We're going to give you that in that sort of way, right? So after World War I, Germany is quite at struggle, at issue with what it is. What is the Germany? After their imperialist notions had been destroyed by the Allied powers. Again, we're in World War I now. So their notions of empire, which of course are going to come right back in starting in 1933, right? Hitler's going to attach right back onto that notion of empire and influence. But after World War I, Germany looks at that and at that recent history and goes, man, is that us? Is that what we are? Are we a war-starting country with grand notions of empire? Or are we this long history that precedes that, in which Germany and German culture, I mean, there was no such thing as Germany, but Germanic culture was highly influential in the arts and in architecture and literature, in philosophy and economics and all of these areas. And so Germany, very much after World War I, has no distinct grip on itself, its identity as a country. And similarly, at that time, we have extreme economic chaos. That after World War I, and the same is going to be true all the way through the 1920s and 1930s, that very much gives rise to Hitler. That unemployment, I mean, in the United States, we're really still talking about 9% unemployment. And yes, that's dramatic and traumatic individually and as a culture. But imagine a time in which 40 to 45% of the population was unemployed. Well, after World War II and all throughout the 1920s, unemployment is going to be over 20, 30, 40% at some time. Right? So you can imagine that looking back at a country and thinking about our country and our identity, that similarly through the 1920s, who are we? Where are we going? What are we doing? Is very, very much in flux. If that number of people don't have jobs, economically speaking, our country just cannot move forward in that way. Right? Go to many, many sub-Saharan African countries, and you see the exact same thing. Few people with a whole lot of money, but most people with almost no money. This is why those countries can't get going. It's because so few have so very, very much. Same kind of thing was going, loosely can be said about Germany at this time. So economically, historically, then economically and politically, Germany is very much in turmoil. What do we do? What type of government do we have? We've had more or less a king. Germany has had, what was his name? King Wilhelm? It's not right. Whatever, it doesn't matter. He's been a king. Well, what do you do now? We don't have a king. Now, what type of leadership do you have? What type of governmental system do you have? Right, as the United States has found out for the last decade, it's not real easy just to export democracy into another country and go, hey, here's a present. Have fun, enjoy, and appreciate, right? That we've watched Iraq. Oh God, I hope we don't watch Iran. Because if you liked Afghanistan and Iraq, you're going to freaking love Iran.
Yeah!
I am going to play some Tool. No, right? That indeed, that, oh gosh, now let me get that going here. Indeed, that the notion of replacing a government with another government is not a very easy thing. So historically, economically, politically, Germany is, as I put in another, the next line here, very much in flux. As one historian calls it, bordering between tyranny and chaos. So we're describing this time period as this bordering between tyranny and chaos. We happen to know, looking back at it now, that they very much choose tyranny. Right? That electing someone who very openly avows that he is going to be a dictatorial fascist type of leader is choosing tyranny, right? That what tyranny is absolute control. That in a moment of chaos, or in this case, in a decade plus of chaos, of a country and of individuals just kind of drifting, not knowing direction and where they're headed and what they're working for, that a leader who comes along, if you're not videoing, I'm just outside the video here, a leader who comes along and says, I will solidify you. I will give concretization to our country, that might look very attractive in some way, right? And so we know that Germany ends up choosing this tyranny over the chaos that they have been experiencing, right? This is chaos, drifting. This is, right, so chaos is not like anarchy where there are no rules. Chaos is that idea of not going anywhere. Fred Flintstone running as fast as he can, but his car's not going anywhere, sort of thing, right? Absolute chaos in that sense. And a historian looks back at that and says, you can really see Germany bordering in this sense between a complete and utter chaos and the tyranny that they obviously end up showing. The film, so the connection between that historical moment that I've given only the briefest introduction to, is the connection is directly between the types of films, the content of those films, as well as what we're going to give the name, the style. Of expressionism, come to reflect that teetering, that bordering between tyranny and chaos. It is not surprising at all that the most emblematic figure of this time historically, and who becomes a major character in many, many German productions at the time, is the character of Dracula. That Dracula, as a novel that had been written in 1870, somewhere, 1880, about roughly. Anyone back me up on that? If you've not ever read Bram Stoker's Dracula, you're missing out on truly one of the great novels ever written. Regardless, if you think about what we know historically, okay, in terms of fiction, and I guess, maybe you're a vampire kid or you're a goth kid. You ever see that episode of South Park? Vampire kids versus goth kids. Anyway, right? Maybe you're a vampire kid and you believe in all of it. And regardless, I'm not here to debate that for you. But historically, looking back fictional, what we know about Dracula is that he is the ultimate fascist dictator. Right? Because you come under his spell, however that happens, biting on the neck, or you just become a servant of Dracula, and you do what he says. You do his bidding for him. You go and do his work. So if you've watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola version with America's greatest actor, Keanu Reeves, in it, you'll, all right, yeah. With Keanu Reeves in it, there's a moment in which he is writing a lot of this story is told with his letters that he's writing to his girlfriend in the city in London, and he's left her, and he writes her these letters and says, this is the strangest country I've been, right? He's gone over to Transylvania to talk to this guy, Count Orlok or Dracula, And he's writing back to his betrothed back home, or his girlfriend back home, and he's saying, man, this is the strange, I'm just not sure who I am anymore. And he's, in that version of it, Keanu's laying in bed at some time, and 3 women come in and they start molesting him, frankly, or maybe it's good. Anyway, right? And they're like all over him and this sort of thing, and then suddenly Dracula appears in the room, and he just sends them away, right? That Dracula sees this confusion in this character. He reads his letters before they ever go out. Maybe they don't even get sent, I can't recall. But he reads those letters, he sees that confusion, and he walks literally into the room at that moment, or he appears in the room at that moment, and goes, I can offer you some solidification of your character. That drifting, chaotic feeling you have, I offer you a solution for that. And then you can hear in all my phrasings right now, I'm working towards Hitler in 1933. I can offer you this. I can bring us about a solution. I know where the problem lies. Let me fix it, and that sort of thing. All of this stuff is brought up through the Dracula story as well. So it's not surprising that, as we'll see in just a moment, watching The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a movie that's not about Dracula in a strict fashion, but it's about somebody who controls a sleepwalker, a somnambulist, someone who sleepwalks, who will do the work of this Dr. Caligari. And we're going to watch a whole bunch of that in just a moment. So the content of these stories in films like Humongulous is also, it occurs to me, if you ever watched the 3rd Road Warrior movie, Welcome to the Terror Dome? No, that's Public Enemy. Thunderdome. Terror Dome's Public Enemy album. How about Public Enemy? Do we have that on our playlist? Any Public Enemy? No one
Fight the Power.
Fight the Power. There you go. You need to be listening to it. Take a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, or Fear of a Black Planet. Come on now, gotta listen to it. Anyway, that's the Terror Dome. The Thunderdome, is that what this one's called? In the Thunderdome, there's a guy who is, what is her name? Who's the bad woman in the movie? Tina Turner. Tina Turner. She controls a guy who, well, frankly, he just wears a little codpiece, and that's all, and he's like super big and muscular. His name is Humongulous in that movie, named after a character from a movie from the 1930s, 20s German cinema. But in these movies, you get lots of this talk about characters who are bordering, who are not in control of themselves, and who find control in subordination, that is, giving it up to the master, in that sense, ceding all of control in that sort of way. So in terms of content, that's what we've got going on in the movies of Germany in the 1920s, roughly the 1920s. But what about stylistically? Very wholeheartedly, German cinema at this time, if American cinema was turning dramatically towards the action movement of slapstick comedy. Remember, still in the silent era, silent slapstick was the dominant mode of American movies in the 1920s. Gives way to gangster pictures and then romantic comedies in the 1930s, which we'll talk about both of those later on. If American cinema was turning towards that, stylistically speaking, German cinema made a major move towards what we call expressionism. And we need to contrast expressionism in film, but also in all the other arts, because expressionism is not something that just goes along with film, but it goes along with architecture and painting and literature as well. We understand what expressionism is by noting in a real way that it's opposed to naturalism. You know that if you're took public high school and you're in an English class and your teacher said, okay, look at this list of books and go and write me a book report, that horrible assignment, go give me a book report. What the worst assignment an English teacher could ever do is to go and ask you to do a book report. One of the books was always Red Badge of Courage on there, and so you always made, or at least I did, always made sure not to read it. Right? If you think that's great, I know it sucks. Sort of response. Well, Red Badge of Courage, one of the things that we might praise about the Red Badge of Courage is, hold on, I can't type and talk. One of the things we might praise about Red Badge of Courage is that it very much is in the naturalist vein. That is, the narrator of that novel, of the story rather, the narrator of the story in there describes events and actions and exchanges with people exactly as they occurred. He, the narrator, does not put his spin, his interpretation, or colorization on any of that. He just describes things literally as they happen. It's a naturalist. In painting, the naturalist school of art might best be represented by the Hudson Valley School, a movement of painting in the United States and in New York State that we call the Hudson Valley around the Hudson River and its valley that it creates. And if you were a painter in the Hudson Valley tradition, you painted something exactly as it looked. So if I stood in the valley of the Hudson River with your painting, I could stand right where you stood and hold it out and go, holy cow, that looks exactly like it. There's the pine trees, there's the oak tree. You even got the little hawk that's flying right there. Awesome. It's exactly as it looks, right? Naturalistic in that sense. It's as close to reality as an art form can possibly get. So Expressionism is opposed to that because it uses distortion and abstraction. Let's take symbolism off of here. We don't need to worry about that. But it employs distortion and abstraction nowhere more evidently and popularly than in Edvard Munch's very famous painting, The Scream, or Madonna, but The Scream being more popular, more well-known, right? That in looking at this from an Expressionist period, here we've got latest 19th century, an Expressionist period, that in looking at The Scream by Munch here, we can tell that this is a human form, but it's not like Macaulay Culkin. It doesn't look like him at all. No? Anyway. It doesn't look like a real person, but we can tell it's based on a real person. Then in looking at the painting, we can see, okay, you must be on some sort of pier here, because this looks to be water with and this looks to be the pier with some other human figures in the background. We can make out that this is the horizon with some sunset rise on it, reflecting down into the water itself. But yet it's not, if I go and stand out on a pier on the lake, it's not going to look like this. It has distorted and abstract features about the thing. This character is abstracted. Edvard Munch, the painter, might be painting it this way because that's the way he sees the world. Not that his eyes, he's got problems and needs glasses. Not in that way, that literal way, but that's how he sees the world. That's what he sees in the world. A panicked, formless figure responding to an unknown presence, right? Because this character seems to be looking either at or through us or behind us in some way, right? So Munch translates, unlike the narrator of Red Badge of Courage, Munch here translates his vision of reality onto the canvas. And so the characters, the type of style that we're going to see in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and perhaps, if we have time, a little Nosferatu, are going to be working in this vein. That indeed, the entirety of Dr. Caligari, the entire film is done on set. There's no natural setting at all. They never go on location and shoot. As you'll see in just a moment, examples will be all throughout. The ways in which the windows, the chairs, the doors, the prison, all these elements we'll see in just a moment, look like those things, but yet, thankfully, are not the windows, doors, or prison bars that I'm used to seeing. Yeah?
Would you say that the picture represents depersonalization disorder?
Monks? Depersonalization disorder?
Yeah.
Monks? No, not necessarily. I'm not going to be any psychologist. Having just seen A Dangerous Method about Freud and Carl Jung, I'm not going to step into interpreting it in that way. But what we can recognize is that he paints this picture because that's how he sees the world. It might be the case there's dementia involved or something like that. There might be, but for our purposes, I don't see that helps us understand Expressionism too much right now. So, to German Expressionism more pointedly, right? So if the Red Badge of Courage and other forms of literature and art that work to say this is exactly how things are, as opposed to that, Expressionism is going to work to render, as I just suggested about Munch himself, the interior subjective. So rather than delivering it straight as it is, he's going to work, this style is going to work to render the internal, the subjective, in an external fashion. So to render the internal, right, the psychology and the mood, these things are internal in that sense. Remember about international cinema's development, I claimed that German cinema is going to use elements of mise en scène to investigate mood and psychology. now we have its fruition in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. That in order to, in employing rather, expressionistic sets and designs, as we'll see in just a moment here, we're doing that in order to render the internal, the subjective. So for those non-native English speakers, right, internal and subjective are kind of synonymous, right? What's going on inside the mind, and this is what is objective. Exactly how it is, right? Objective, and that goes along with naturalism. Here, we've got the subject of that work, or the internal, if the case is that also Edvard Munch's paintings come to represent some other internal misfirings that are going on in his brain, that also might be the case as well. So, but it is about rendering that ways in which we see the world. Remember, the world to Germany in 1920s is this bordering between tyranny and chaos, very much in search of itself as a nation, as well as individuals. Jonathan Harker's character in Dracula, the guy Keanu Reeves plays, who goes from London to Transylvania, is very much in that sense in flux. And as I suggested about Germany's use of mise-en-scène to render the internal or the mood and psychology, it also gives rise that you don't have to just show stuff, you can reveal the unknown. You can give image to the unknown. The characters at the beginning of Caligari, one character at the very beginning of Caligari is going to be talking to another guy and he's going to say, hey, that's my girlfriend right there. Let me tell you about the strange stories that we have gone through. But I have to be careful because there are ghosts and ancient shapes all around us. So he's very much recognizing that the world is in flux, and similarly, he's going to give rise, going to give stories about that unknown quality. So let's check out a bunch of these clips, and I'll come back to the other point here in just a moment. And we're going to watch a bunch of it, and I'm going to have to fast forward and all that. Erase, go away, clear. So this is just pointing out that they have all of the, you'll see color changes in here that are the result not of color film, but of the result of tinting and dyeing of the film strip itself. Do you know who the band, there's a band called Bauhaus? There was a band that ended up being called, what did they change the name to? One guy in Bauhaus dies and they become, let's see, what does Joy Division become? New Order. What is Bauhaus? They turn it Love and Rockets. Anyway, Bauhaus is the name given to German architecture of the expressionistic type. Okay. All apologies, hold on a second, I gotta change this around. All apologies, this DVD seems to have gotten a soundtrack written by the Kronos Quartet starring Jerry Garcia if he were a really abstract guitar player. The guy from the Grateful Dead. It's a terrible soundtrack. So it's all like, ooh, spooky. And it lasts forever because they don't think you can read. All right, so the movie just started. There was a guy who just said this to another guy. I'm going to come right back to him. That's the guy doing the listening. All right, so this is the very opening of the movie. And the sound is turned up because it's silent. Erasure. Who did Erasure become? Who was Erasure? Band Erasure? Love and Rockets? I think I'm right. Didn't the guy from Bauhaus hang himself on stage during a performance of Bizarre Love Triangle? I think that's right. How about that? Can you imagine being at a concert and the lead singer hanging himself on stage to death? All right, so the guy just said, hey, that's my girlfriend. I don't know if he said it yet. Okay, that's my wife or whatever. There you go, what she and I have been through. See, they don't think you can read.
So who went back and put it all in English?
I don't know who, not necessarily, but we. Someone who spoke English is the best I can say. It would have been in German. All right, so if you can't quite follow it right now, we're about to go into flashback. Right? We irised in and then irised out. Let me tell you about it. Iris out, iris back in. This is the little town where I was born, he just said. Notice, like Edvard Munch's Scream, you can tell it's based on a town, but is no real town at all. Just like the pier and the guy standing on the pier, right? It's abstracted in that way. And because that we're new to flashbacks, to alternatives to linear storytelling, it keeps going back and forth, like going, like really, now this time I'm gonna go to flashback and stay there. Him. So everything down to the, all of this, obviously that's a set, right? There's no town back there, that's a painting drawn on cardboard. Even, then I'll see they're gonna still fumble around the flashback, right? Did you get it? Did you get it? We're going to flashback. That even the walking and the action of the characters is expressionistic. So this guy, my friend Alan, is in a room, and we're gonna watch him, and he's pathetically, well, he's pathetic, but he's also going to be forlorn. You're going to see him tired, and he's wanting to do something. But just notice for just a second, like you can tell that's a window, but yet, that's not any window I know. And as you'll see further on, that window, you see the sunlight that's coming in out through the window? It's not sunlight at all, it's just painting on the floor. Right? There's no light in this entire movie at all. Obviously there's light somewhere because they're filming the thing, but there's not going to be any light in the movie at all. Everything you'll see in just a little while, light that's going up some stairs, and they've painted it, you know, like the door opens, but they've just painted onto the floor. Every single thing, even down to his chair, right? You can tell that that's a chair, but my heavens, no one sits in chairs like that, right? Everything is abstracted all the way to his acting. You saw when just a moment ago it said him. That's Dr. Caligari. You'll meet him in just a moment. I mean, he's even walking and he's using his cane on the other side and he's spinning around. Everything. In just a moment, you're going to meet a character named Caesar, who, if you're goth, you're going to love him because like all body, black tights and stuff. And he walks everywhere like this, right? Like no one walks like that, but no one looks like the screen either. Our goth guy definitely's got Black Veil Brides like going with that earbuds. Black Veil Bride, is that right? No. Are they any good, Black Veil Brides? No. All right. So what I was putting up here is that we're inside of another story now. We're in a flashback, right? So the story started, or our story starts with them sitting on a bench, and he goes, let me tell you some stories about my girlfriend and my friend Alan. Now we're in a flashback. So I've opened another parentheses, and I'll close in just a moment as the movie progresses. Now we're downtown. So in Hamburg, this story is based on a legend that taking place in northern Germany, near Hamburg, in Hamburg, Germany, in the Holstenwall area of Hamburg, and it is right next to the greatest red light district in the whole world. The Reeperbahn in Hamburg is, if you just like, you think you want to go to Amsterdam because you want to go to the red light district, skip it and go to Hamburg's red light district. Not only can you go to the bar where the Beatles first ever played and became famous, the Cavern, which is still there, set up just like it was in 1959, 61 time period. But the red light district is super awesome, and not just for those reasons. but there is Hubbestrasse in which no women are allowed to walk because the women in the windows are the product. And no women are allowed on the street. Check that out. You imagine that? Anyway, imagine that happening in Atlanta. Anyway, oh well, you could. Anyway, but also, so the building in which I lived in Hamburg is right beside the Lake Bond, and it's the same building in which there are going to be murders happening here, in which these murders ostensibly took place at the building I lived. And then, so I lived there like '89, which who cares, gives a crap, until 2001 when they found out where all those folks had flown the planes into the World Trade Centers. They lived in the same building in Hamburg. Statement. Story. So we'll just go back to Jerry. So, Caligari comes to the county office and he wants to get a permit to join the fair. He wants to do his little display with his tent. It's kind of cool, red and black cornrows going back, and you know his gloves even have skeleton look about them. If you've noticed them, no county clerk is sitting on a stool that looks like that. That's abstracted. Here, Jerry Garcia is like really tripping right now. So you can see how opposed to realism or naturalism this is. It's not supposed to look like your world at all, but distorted and abstracted. And some guy on a timpani drum who's just going, whoa, dude. What kind of a sleepwalker? Somnambulist, sleepwalker. And he laughs at him. Oh, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You can have your darn thing. Permit. So he goes to the fair and he's going to set up his tent. I was going to sing you Whitney Houston's version of I Will Always Love You, but I thought that might be disrespectful. Come on in. Come to my event. I've got Caesar in here. Wait, what happened to that one? Yeah, come in here. I've got Caesar in here. And then people go in there. But then a murder happens. The town clerk is killed. And some drunk lethal weapon. Jazz, yeah, there you go. Chow Yun-fat in The Killers, where he plays the saxophone. So the town clerk has been killed. I wonder who did that. Check out the window. All right, back at the fair. This guy slept for a long, long time, 23 years old, as a matter of fact, continuously come right in. He can tell your future. I'm going to wake him up right in front of you. He tells everybody. All right, come on in. Caesar, come on out. Come on, goth kid. There he comes. There's goth kid. All right, so Caesar comes out. He goes, there, Caesar, I command you, wake up. You want to go see Willie Nelson last night? Goth makeup. Expressionistic goth makeup. Expressionistic eye opening. Now that he's awake, ask him any questions. It took him like 4 minutes to walk out of the coffin. The cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a coffin in which the guy just came out. Oh, it was up there, the cabinet. It's a coffin. So he says, ask him any questions. You can tell your future anybody. Step right up. Oh, there you go. Ask him any questions. Come on, man. Just keep going. How long will I live? Our stupid friend Alan asks. Don't ever ask a fortune teller that question, because no matter the answer, you're going to hate it. How long am I going to live? So the answer, the music indicates that kind of sucks. The answer. And he's kind of upset about it. Remember, it's even expressionistic acting, right? He can't say, dude, that kind of makes me weird and upset, kind of, he can't say anything. He's got to huff and puff it. Oh, I already did play Dance in here. I already played that song. I didn't play that again. You live until dawn. All right, so they run into a girl, like that movie you said, what did you bring up? This Means War. They both love her. This story is so old. Right? They both love her, and they decide, oh, we both really love her. We're going to let her decide, but no matter what, we're going to be friends. I mean, how often, how many times do we have to hear that same story? This is, did they call her Jane at the beginning? That's Jane, my girlfriend. I think it's Jane. That was Jane. The girl who at the beginning of the movie was walking around with her eyes rolled up in her head, like a zombie. Here we are at Caligari's single glide. This is, we are in this flashback. That's right. I'll close that as we get to it. So this is the story that Francis, the first guy, is telling the old guy sitting outside. He goes, there, let me tell you about my town. Now we're in this town. Oh, come on, guys. Just talk it out. They say, oh, we'll remain friends. There you go. See, we're going to remain friends. Yes, we will. So you remember about German cinema that I said one of the ways that they worked to increase its stature among the arts was that they did the author film, right? That they based movies on the stories told by famous authors. This is one of those famous stories that had been recently written in a novel form based on an old myth. And so this woman comes over, and apparently she'd been sleeping with him because he's dead now, and she could report it. And she tells our friend Francis that Alan is dead. And they are distraught. Check out the window in the background. And cut there in his bedroom. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, they're in Alan's bedroom. Contrast this with what we've watched of early American cinema, particularly Birth of a Nation, and you notice that you're having to do a lot of thinking through it. What is this? Who is this? How are they connected? What's going on? What is this? Etc. What does this mean? Your eyes moving about the page. Contrast that with D.W. Griffith, who tells you and shows you exactly everything. By intercutting, cross-cutting, etc. He tells you exactly what to look at and how to look at that stuff. The meaning is in the shot. Here, the meaning of these things is taking place in your brain. Right? You're thinking through, ostensibly. I don't know. This soundtrack is going to kill me. Right? So he goes to the cops, and like so many movies, he goes to the cop and he goes, you know what? I'm going to lead this investigation. Never knows how many civilians end up leading cops' investigations. Anyway, he's going to lead this investigation because he knows that Caligari's guy just told him that he was going to die at dawn. So, there's a connection. There's light going up the staircase. BT dubs, light doesn't bend like that. Right? It wouldn't bend up a staircase, but the light that ostensibly is here with shadows throwing was curving up the staircase, right? That means, by the way, Jane, it looks like it's me. Alan's dead. Yeah, Alan's dead. That leaves us. Shall we consummate right now? No, I'm just kidding. That's not where the movie goes. Yes, dead. I almost hear her saying. I didn't hear him saying that. More. So she's kind of upset about this because she must have loved him more than friend Francis. There is that soundtrack is still running. So let's skip over that guy. We don't need to worry about him. All right, now we go to Caesar. To Caligari's place, and he's got Caesar in his cabinet. He's going to give him some porridge. Or what we got going on. What are you talking about? I know some guy's dead, but I mean, look, go right on in my house. You'll see that Caesar's in there, and he's just kind of laying there. he hadn't done anything. Let's get that guy, I don't need to worry about him. And then he's like, cool, okay. Guess that's alright. Just say so, sure. Wake him up. No. So another note comes in, it says, a murderer has been caught, and this is the guy I've skipped over. So they think that they've solved the crime because this murderer has been caught. And they say, no, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. I tried to, yeah, let's skip over. So now, Jane's father has been gone away a long time. Dr. Jane or whatever has been gone a long time. She doesn't know where he's gone, so she's going to go ask Caligari about it. Oh, Dr. Olson, excuse me. Well, I don't know, honey. Why don't you come in? You want some candy? Come on in. I got some butterscotch. I should have shown you that, but Caesar's going to open his eyes and he's going to go, hey, what's up? He's going to make eyes at her, googly eyes. So now they've just buried Francis, excuse me, before he died. So you see that no cemetery I know has got things like that on the top of it. You know, it's abstracted and distorted, and they're sad. One of the things that you'll notice from this movie, as well as any other German expressionist film of the time period, is that it uses extreme elements of light and dark in order to investigate the notion of mood. And so famous paintings from Rembrandt van Rijn are painted with very light and dark elements within the frame in order to highlight certain things, particularly mood and psychology. We call that use of light and dark elements chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro, the use of light and dark elements in contrast so that you can show that those elements of mood and psychology. We'll see these heavily influencing American films in the 1940s called film noir. That many of these directors who make German films during this time period, let me pause this for a second. There he is, Caesar walking like I told you. Many of the filmmakers in the 20s and 30s in Germany are going to escape fascism and come to the United States, and they're going to make films that are called film noir. We're going to talk more about them later on. But we can see in the French word for dark in here. They're going to make very dark crime movies. That is really about a dark, seedy underside of American criminal life. Well, chiaroscuro is the use of dark and light elements in a frame in order to draw contrast to those things. You'll see influences in film noir, but then even in neo-noir films from Blade Runner, which uses high contrast colors, differentiations, and not just black and white in that case, but through Sin City and V for Vendetta, etc. These movies are going to use high contrast colors. In the traditional form, it's called chiaroscuro, using light and dark elements within the frame in order to amplify or to investigate that internal, interior in an external fashion. So Caesar's out of his cabinet. And got his tights with his Doc Martens on, tucked into them. And we assume that he's going to go meet our fair Jane, because here she is, cross-cut between two things. Hey, stalkers, here's the way to do it. Right here. Here's the way to do it. Just go to the window. Her very, very tall windows. and just pull the frame up. Oh, firewall, what firewall? Right, so it's all of this is abstracted and distorted as part of that expressionistic aesthetic. And Jane either sleeps in mosquito netting or is going to die by suffocation through linen. And is in the middle of a chiropractic maneuver. Broke her neck. Oh, man. It's like Edward. I love you so I won't kill you. To Bella. All you Twilight fans just giggled. Everyone else like, what? Isn't that the theme of Twilight? I love you so I won't kill you. You thought I was kidding about the suffocation by the linen. Look at that, she sleeps in her wedding gown or something. You hear that? I don't know why these two guys are sleeping right next door to her room, or why this woman walks in. But Francis is right there too, and he's not happy. Look, there he is, carrying Jane over the rooftops. And so now he's escaping over the rooftops of adjacent buildings, running around them, right? Abstracted. Wow, wait. Sorry. And there, but notice, someone is sitting there watching Caligari. You saw a real quick cut to Caligari and someone looking in a window. A cop is looking in at Caligari and the cabman in there. Now we're going through the forest, where one would get tired carrying another person. Like he apparently is too. Apparently a lot of people sleep outside our bedroom. Regardless, they're all chasing it. However they got there. Being goth, he probably drinks PBR and smokes Winston's, some crap like that. And he can't handle it. And it's just too much and he's overcome by it. And he falls off a cliff. There's Jane. Oh, good, you've got Jane back. I'm so happy. Jane, I, your master, command you, wake up. Just kidding, that's it. And now her eyes are like they were in the very beginning of the movie, like rolled up in her head, and she's like, she's got PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Say something. What are you talking about? I just checked him out. He's asleep in his cabinet back in Caligari. What are you talking about? You're like delusional. You're like a woman and everything. And how many movies do that, right? How many classic style movies do that? They're just like, well, you're what? Smack her. Terrible. Anyway. Don't worry, we're getting there, as you can see by the navigation bar. No, dang it, I know it was him. Something like that. And they go, oh, let's go find out if Caesar, what's going on? We got to investigate this, led by our newly deputized Francis.
That's right, we need most of us.
You do wonder if Walt Disney got the idea for Mickey Mouse's gloves. Right there. You see that?
We really simple right
Except Mickey's only got like 3 fingers, which has got to be really problematic not having an opposable digit. So here's Caesar. What? That's not Caesar. That's a dummy. Oh God. What is happening? Where's Caligari? He's getting away in the mountains. There's some radical guitar playing going on presently too, which I want to submit. Good thing I gave up those Winstons. I'll make it. See, like where Caesar. And where does he go? He runs away and he sneaks into an insane asylum. That says insane. So he goes in and he goes, hey man, some brother just walked in here and some weird stuff been going on outside, so can I talk to somebody in charge here? In this insane asylum, in which I just walked in the front door of, easily. Oh, anyway, so this guy's very good ethically, and he goes, I can't tell you about patients here, but maybe we can go and see Herr Director. And he just got back a little while ago, so let's go check him. Only he can talk to you about that stuff. Since you're new Deputy Francis. Here, just come further down the hallway in our asylum to this door behind these bars and go and meet Herr Director. Oh, excuse me, you're the director of this insane? Oh. So he's like, yeah, I'm the director, what's up? He goes, holy crap. He is not happy about this, he's freaked out, he's like, unbelievable. That hey, dudes, your director is like a serial killer, mind control freak. Get down here. By the way, BT Dubs, don't have a mental flip out when you're inside. Right? Just, if you can control it just for a little while longer, you get outside the gate, you'll be better off. I know that this is him. Let's keep going. I know that this is him. And they're like, okay, you've convinced us. He's asleep now. Let's go into his office. Yo.
So this is basically like Shutter Island.
Or Shutter Island is basically this, yes.
Yeah, basically.
It's exactly right. I mean, if you watch that movie the whole time, you know exactly what's going on. True. All right, so they're like, okay, he's asleep. Let's go into his office, deputy. So you know he's sleeping. They'll cut away to him and just Caligari in just a moment, and he's going to be heavy breathing like he's sleeping. All right, we got to pick up the pace here. I wouldn't pack up, though, because you missed those 2 questions on the exam, which is next Monday. Here, we'll even go into his special books. I'll let you privy into all of them. Pray tell, look through them all. Here's a book on sleepwalking, which is like his favorite specialty, dude. And they're like reading about him. They read about Caligari. They read about a somnambulist, a sleepwalker. They read about all of this stuff. They're looking at his books. And then they go, hey, we got to get to one more spot forward here. Well, that didn't go anywhere. And see, they're all reading. And we go into, here's his diary. Anyway. one thing I have a fascination with in life is video vlogs, like video diaries, especially goth kids. Video diaries. I love that. Are you friends? That's so funny. Chris Crocker is my favorite all-time person in the world. Anybody know Chris Crocker?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So now, hold on just a second. So now we've just gone into his diary. We saw them reading a diary, and then it irised in, closed in, and now it irised back out to this. So we are in another flashback in that sense. We are in a flashback that's coming from his diary. So we are back in time now, right? In his diary. So this is why Caesar has not fallen off a cliff, right? Because we're back in time. So this is the first moment that he came to the insane asylum, and the doctor, the director of the place goes, "Oh, this is awesome. I've always really liked sleepwalkers." It's totally pervy anyway, but he likes sleepwalkers. This is awesome. All right, you guys, all get out of here. Not you. He'll send them on. He goes, "Look, I got my prize pupil. Can I make him do anything?" And so now we're reading the diary. Now that those pictures were come from. So it says, "I wonder if I could get him to do things that he would never do when he was in a waking state. Could I even get him to commit murder?" Or whatever, however he said. Right? Can I get him to commit murder? So we're in that flashback. Now